This video classroom lesson is sponsored by Transmission Bench. Visit the transmissionbench.com store for the deluxe super kit, other parts, and even the video classroom lessons used during this project.
Welcome back. This is Project 4L60E, Part 1, Lesson 3. At this point, let me remind you of what we've covered so far. We talked about our goals with the transmission, discussed our workspace, and removed a few parts. As we move forward with the disassembly, there are three distinct areas of the transmission we'll work in. The first section is the valve body area, accessible by removing the pan. The second area is from the front pump to about midway through the case. The third section begins there and is mainly the planetary gear area to the output shaft. This lesson, along with lessons 4 and 5, are about the disassembly of the valve body area. Let's turn the transmission around, turn it over, and get started. I'm wearing gloves because of the sharp edges on the case. Even the splines on the output shaft and the stator support can cut your hands, so be careful. To make it easier to work on, get the pan rail as level as possible. I found two 2x4 sections are the perfect height and put them here under the case. Make sure your transmission is stable. Also, make sure that even if it rolls over, it cannot roll off the work surface onto your body, especially your feet. If you're working on a 1993 to 1996 one-piece case version, get it level too. Use wood to chock both sides of the bell housing. In this lesson, you'll need a 10 and 13 millimeter sockets, extension, ratchet, and a small screwdriver. Remove the 16 pan bolts. Put them in the box. Lift the pan. Notice the magnet here. It's usually covered with a grayish-black sediment. For now, don't clean anything. Set it on the bench in this area. The gasket usually sticks to the pan. If yours doesn't, remove it from the case and set it on the pan. As a side note, don't throw anything away until the transmission project is finished. You may need to compare a new part with an old one later. Remove the filter by twisting and pulling it up. Put it in the pan like this. Our next step is to disconnect and move the wiring harness. Start by using a small screwdriver to disconnect the manifold pressure switch. Gently lift the tab like this while pulling the wires. Only pry up just enough to clear the bars because the plastic gets brittle with time and heat. If it breaks off, that's okay, we'll fix it later. Disconnect the two shift solenoids here. Unclip the 3-to-2 downshift solenoid. Do the same with the electronic pressure control or EPC solenoid. Earlier model transmissions have a flat spade type connector like this. Use a screwdriver and gently pry it away from the solenoid like you see here. On 1995 and up models, you must remove the PWM or pulse width modulation solenoid. Take a small screwdriver and pry out the retaining clip. If you can't see it, turn the solenoid back and forth until you can. Hold your fingers over it to keep the retainer from flying out. Carefully twist and pull the solenoid out. Put the retainer back on the solenoid. Put them in the box. This is called the TCC, or Torque Converter Clutch Solenoid. It doesn't disconnect from the wiring harness. Use a 10mm socket and remove these two short bolts. Place both of them in the small box. Twist and pull up the solenoid. Move the wiring harness over the side of the transmission like this. Our last step is to remove the detent spring and roller. Use a 13mm socket. Remove the bolt. And put them with the other small parts. That's all for now. See you in Lesson 4.